Hello. Thank you for coming to my presentation today. First, I want the interpreter voice off. I'm going to sign an idea without an interpreter. I come here today to present. Obviously, you guys are seated, but I am signing. That is obvious. All right, go ahead, interpreter. Interpret voice for me, please. You guys are sitting for a minute, and you're thinking, what is she saying? There's no interpreter. The interpreter's not voicing for her. The interpreter is here not to voice for me, no. For you all, because you guys don't understand sign. And that is why an interpreter here. For you guys to ask me a question. And is it perfect for access to communication for both of us. I want you all to remember that the interpreter is here for both of us. I want to start with a few questions. I'm going to assign a question and give you a few answer choices. And you all are going to think which one is right. Remember, right answer, A, B, C, D, which one do I pick? No. This is all for you to learn. All this information to put back into your mind, have it in your schema. I'm not going to go into depth, no. I'm just going to touch on everything. So while you guys are out, you guys will continue to learn. Also, a second point I'd like to bring up is that if you guys are wondering or have a question to ask, go ahead and ask me. Raise your hand, ask me. The reason is because when you guys leave, that question that you want answered, it's not scary to ask a question. I'm deaf. I'm here. I'm here for you guys to ask a question, not a book. It's very important that you guys remember these 2 points. All right, I'm going to start assigning questions to you, and you guys pick which answer you think is right. Okay? Awesome. Let's see. Okay. Which word best describes a person who cannot hear? Number 1, deaf. Number 2, hard of hearing. Number 3, hearing impaired. Number 4, physically impaired. Or number 5, I just don't know. All right, how many of you think the first one, deaf? How many? Raise your hand. Around 10, okay. How many people would say it's hard of hearing? Now I expect you guys to answer. You can't not answer. No, none for number 2. What about hearing impaired? How many think hearing impaired? Maybe 3, okay. And number 4, physically impaired. How many would say physically impaired? None, okay. And 5, I just don't know. How many? Okay. So the best answer is deaf. Deaf is obvious. It's clear that you are involved in the culture, that you are culturally deaf, that you use ASL. You can't hear, hearing impaired, it's different. You identify as deaf. Half of America, about half, 60% of America, range from deaf, hard of hearing, to late deafened. But if you shorten that, or dwindle it down, and count Massachusetts itself, 300,000 have hearing loss. That's a big decrease. Okay, 40,000 are deaf. And later, we shorten that number and we'll ask a question about it. All right, second question. Is ASL or sign language a universal language? True or false? How many think true? How many think false? Oh, wow, good job. So you all are right. For another country, they use a different sign language. In America, we use American Sign Language, ASL. Has its own grammatical features, not manuals. For an interpreter, they must have training. They have to study the linguistics to become an interpreter. Just like spoken language or translators, interpreters have to have the same thing, have to have training programs so they can be able to sign. Isn't that cool? All right, one example for run. The English word run itself has a sentence that you can change at the end of it. However, with ASL, run has many different examples. Run like this, run like that, run as in sports, challenge, going somewhere. For interpreters, you have to understand the concept and then change it into ASL to match that concept. Okay, for the next question. Can most deaf people or all deaf people read lips? True or false? Who thinks true? One. Okay. How many think false? Maybe 8, 9. Well, you guys will be right. Research shows that 30% deaf people can pick out some lip reading. However, they miss a lot of information. Okay, 2 words. I'm going to give an example. Guess which word this one was? Ice, ice. Another said test. Another person said sit. Another person said 10. Yes. Wow, many different answers. Okay, what about this one? Deaf, deaf. Another person said deaf. 6. Okay. All right, so I'm following the paper, and the real word that I said, the first word, was 6. The second word I said was deaf. So you get the concept, the idea, that sentence can have a word that's similar to another one, and you miss a lot of information. It's hard, it's tough. But many people assume that deaf people are expert lip readers. But research shows from experience, training, speaking. So, example. So somebody says the word 50. So a deaf person goes into their wallet, gets 50 cents, come back, and they're ready, 50 cents. And the cashier looks at them, and they're like, oh, I said 15. I thought it said 50. And they're taken advantage of. See how they miss information like that? Okay, next question. Let's see. For a person, can a person who knows sign also be an interpreter? True or false? How many for true? 1. And false, how many? Half? Maybe 10? Other half? The other 10, not sure? All right, the answer is no, can't. No. Why? If somebody who is learning sign involved in the linguistics of the language? No, they're not. They're learning. They're in the very basic stages of learning. However, interpreters know how to culturally mediate, how to involve everything into the culture, how to read everything in sign language. However, somebody who's just signing is the very basics. It's not the same as interpreters. So really, interpreters, they have to go through interpreter training programs. They need that training. All right, next question. No, I don't like that one. All right, this question. True or false? If you all see a person with hearing aids, you assume, okay, yeah, they know sign. They know, they can understand what I'm saying. They can hear speech. How many? For true? 6. All right, what about false? How many think false? 2? Half? Don't know. All right, the answer is no. They cannot, not always. They cannot always understand speech. Remember, one second, hold on one second. Let me look at my notes. Okay. All right, with 3 groups, for example, for this question, from the range of hearing for being deaf, I'm going to compare all the basics of it. Deaf for the first group, hard of hearing for the second group, and late deafened, who are recently became deaf for the third group. For the first group, deaf. Most of them are from schools of the deaf. They know ASL, they're culturally deaf. Let's see my second point. They're generationally deaf, their family's deaf, they've had an ear infection and became deaf, unknown why they're deaf. The second group, hard of hearing, in this hard of hearing group, they have a range. They have one side who went to school for the deaf, they sign, they're involved in deaf culture. The other side is more towards the English side. They have hearing aids. For the English language, half of it's ASL, half of it's English. For the use of language and hard of hearing, half of it's ASL, half of it's English. For the other half, they became deaf with ear infection, sickness, but on the other side, maybe they were born hearing and at age 1, 2, became deaf. However, for the third group, late deafened, they grew up hearing and then later in life they became deaf. All of a sudden, they just couldn't hear. You don't know the reason why? They just became deaf. No hearing whatsoever. Most of the time that's their experience. However, with the second group hard of hearing, they were involved since they were born deaf. So it's obvious to see the comparisons here. The things or the different equipment used to move a house. Knocking on doors, setting things up. But you have to hear and to have to listen for that. It's a constant struggle for this third group.